After 5 continuous weeks of Star Trek Strange New Worlds essentially playing dress-up, a dinosaur planet, a ghost ship, a drunken pleasure resort, a black and white film noir, and then, of all things, a Muppets episode, Off Hour does the last thing anybody ever expected it to do. It doesn't become a genre parody or homage, and instead, it finally gives us a serious, no-gimmicks Star Trek episode. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, it just might be the single best episode of the entire season. So first up, a quick little recap, and don't worry, I won't bore you. I know you've already seen the episode. Basically, the Enterprise was swallowed by a slipstream wormhole, which means, things go to shit from the very first minute. Systems are failing everywhere, crew members are getting seriously injured, and the ship itself is literally physically starting to tear apart at the seams. And it gets worse, because, of course it does, because the wormhole is dragging the Enterprise faster and faster toward the warp barrier, warp 10. And the crew is told point blank that if the ship crosses that line, there's no magical journey ahead of them, the ship will just literally disintegrate. The Enterprise will be toast, and, everyone will die. On top of that, Chief Engineer Pelia gets cut off from the rest of the ship, trapped alone in her quarters, which means there's no one but young Scotty to somehow keep a dying starship in one piece. And that's not all, folks. The worst is yet to come. Down in the sickbay, a heavy medical table gets loose and nearly slices through Dr. Mbenga. I don't mean he got a little wound, I mean he was nearly bisected. Nurse Chapel is also there, sealed with him, and she has to helplessly watch her closest friend in all of Starfleet bleed out with no power or backup or any obvious way to save him. All that with a countdown to getting vaporized. Oof. Now, I know things seemed bleak, but it all worked out, for the most part. Turns out, both these problems can be solved with one solution, a real two birds, one stone situation. Chapel remembers Mbenga's research, the work he did trying to save his terminally ill daughter Rukia back in Season 1 using something called strong force neutrinos. And it just so happens that the slipstream wormhole they're trapped in is absolutely flooded with those exact neutrinos. Pretty lucky coincidence, huh? So, Chapel takes a crazy wild leap. She freezes Mbenga solid, which I'm guessing is meant to be some DIY cryosleep, so his body can't deteriorate. And then, she figures out how to use the neutrinos to stitch his severed torso back together at a level physics shouldn't allow for, not even in a futuristic sci-fi world. And the wormhole neutrinos discovery does turn out to be the key to saving the whole ship, because those neutrinos can reignite the Enterprise's deuterium fuel and get the engines back. Kudos to Chapel, because this one spur-of-the-moment insight solves both crises at once. Scotty later says she literally rewrote the laws of physics, which, I don't have to tell you, is a pretty big deal. What Chapel's miracle actually costs, and why she finally stays. Now, that miracle doesn't happen in an easy-breezy way. Any miracle, just like magic, comes with a price. And this one demanded a blood price. Literally. The problem with pulling off Chapel's plan means that somebody has to physically get outside the ship in order to get the crucial neutrino readings from the Enterprise's ion pod. That means they need to be out on the exposed hull in the middle of all the chaos in a friggin' wormhole. To no one's surprise, especially not after last week's Spock-centric episode, Spock volunteers without hesitation. He spacewalks out onto the hull of the ship, and while he does get the info, in doing so, he soaks up a pretty lethal dose of radiation. Yeah, he should absolutely be dead, but no way that can happen, right? Right, so La'an, who broke up with him last week, if you remember, goes out after him and drags back his injured, irradiated body before it's too late. Once they're back aboard, it takes a full mind meld between the two of them just to properly transfer the data into Scotty's hands so he can do something with it. Meanwhile, that blood price I mentioned? Well, that's on Chapel because she loses a finger jamming that frozen table into place to keep Mbenga stable in one piece while the neutrinos do their work. And the rule of threes comes into play here as well because Una gets seriously injured as well. The ship may have come out the other side alive, but it came out dented and scorched with the whole crew battered and injured. Now, after all this, I'm sure it won't surprise you that the standout of the hour is Chapel. Though she hasn't had a major feature in any of the episodes so far, her arc in this episode is a clear payoff of her story from the beginning. It doesn't take a genius to have noticed that even 4 seasons in, Chapel has never actually fully committed to the Enterprise. And it's no wonder, because this episode reveals she's been on the ship on a temporary duty assignment the entire time. She may have become a fixture to the Watchers, for sure, but to the people on the ship, and even to Spock, she always had one foot out the door. And her earlier argument with Mbenga started when he himself confessed he's planning to walk away from Starfleet. It's like the whole medical crew is planning to bail on the ship, and after this week, it's hard to blame them. Is that what's coming up next episode? Anyways, this episode takes Chapel and puts her through the single worst night of her career, or possibly her whole life, as she's trapped in a dark room with her dying best friend, ordered to abandon him and go help the wounded elsewhere, and choosing to defy that order and stay. She saves Mbenga, and she saves the ship, and after all this, she finally knows exactly where she belongs. Cue cheers when she walks up to Pike and requests a permanent assignment on the Enterprise. After years of drifting and hedging and keeping her escape route to duty elsewhere open, she's ready to consider the Enterprise home. Though I want to remind you that if you know your Star Trek lore, her journey is eventually headed somewhere pretty heartbreaking, which makes watching her actively choose this crew as her family more than a little bittersweet. The Voyager Deep Cut, a face from 1965, and the birth of a miracle worker. There are a couple of deep cuts in this episode that will make longtime Trek fans gasp, and I'm going to tell you what they are just in case you didn't catch it on the first watch. First up is the Warp 10 threat, because that number wasn't a random one chosen on a whim to make people go, oh no. In fact, the only other time in the entire history of this 60-year franchise that Star Trek has seriously grappled with breaking the warp barrier, reaching past Warp 10, was the notorious Star Trek Voyager episode, Threshold, where Tom Paris pushed an experimental shuttle to beyond Warp 10. What happened was that the shuttle felt like it was, or maybe it actually was, occupying every single point in the universe simultaneously. No, I don't really know how to explain that. The craziest part, though, which is also what fans have been relentlessly mocking for 3 decades, is that Paris mutates into a bizarre salamander creature and drags Captain Janeway right along with him into lizardhood. The two even mate and have several offspring. Yeah, it's just as messed up as it sounds. That episode, without exaggeration, is one of the most ridiculed hours in all of Star Trek, and I say this as someone who watched a Muppets episode last week. Hell, that one's so weird that fans have spent 3 decades pretending it doesn't exist. Off Hour walks right up to that idea of breaking the warp barrier, but thankfully nobody gets turned into an amphibian. It changes the situation completely and arguably makes it way more deadly because now they make it clear that the consequences of going past Warp 10 mean instant vaporization, plain and simple. Not only is it a lot clearer, I mean, there's no lizards involved, it's also way less embarrassing. That said, if you paid attention, the Strange New Worlds crew never actually breached that barrier. They managed to get out of the wormhole with just enough wiggle room that it makes sense why the episode didn't end with the whole crew becoming amphibians. I think this could be explained in 2 ways. Either the Enterprise was seconds away from the full salamander transformation and just dodged it, which would mean Threshold is technically still possible, or the show is just deliberately offering a saner alternative to that notorious episode so we can forget about those space lizards for good. Either way, it's almost certainly a wink in solidarity at the fans who have been groaning at that scene, which is the kind of thing the show loves to do, alongside tidying up some of the franchise's past messy missteps along the way. The second gasp comes from a surprise appearance. The episode reintroduces Dr. Phil Boyce. If that name means nothing to you, I don't blame you, because it's a deep, deep cut. Boyce was Pike's chief medical officer all the way back in The Cage, which is the original 1965 Star Trek pilot, which got rejected, and which was the very first thing ever shot for this franchise. Before Kirk and the crew we fell in love with, and even Spock in The Cage wasn't exactly the Spock we know. Boyce hasn't been seen or heard from since, barring a few episodes of TOS, which used archival footage of him, which is more than 60 years of absence. But here he is, back on the Enterprise, as the ship's beta shift CMO, played by Brian Markinson. The story explains that Mbenga has requested his transfer, and specifically wants Boyce to be the one who replaces him if and when he finally quits Starfleet for good. I wouldn't call it fan service, by the way. I mean, who exactly has been clamoring for Boyce to come back? What fan is being serviced by that? Plus, his appearance is important to the story, especially Chapel's, because part of the reason she almost bolts from the ship is that she's convinced she can't work with Boyce, and part of the reason she ultimately stays is proving to herself that she can rise above things like that. I think by now, the show has almost finished stacking up all the doctors it's going to need before the original series era starts, and the only one left is everyone's favorite, Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy. Oh, and we can't forget about Scotty because he gets one of the most important episodes of his run on the show. This is the hour where a young Scotty starts becoming the Scotty we all know and love. So the thing about Scotty on Strange New Worlds is that he doesn't love starships. It would be pretty accurate to say he's scared of them. His last posting, a ship called the Stardiver, went catastrophically wrong and got people killed. So, in his head, a starship is a death trap, which, isn't unfair considering the amount of crises that happen on a near daily basis. This means he considers his home a fragile bomb that's always one bad day away from murdering everyone aboard, and he spends every single waking hour frantically patching the Enterprise up while bracing for the disaster he thinks is inevitable. Pelia, stuck useless in her quarters, ends up mentoring him through the whole crisis over comms, and her lesson is simple but exactly right for this version of Scotty. Stop fighting the ship and start trusting it. He has to learn to feel what the Enterprise is actually capable of. He can't just keep treating it like a bipolar serial killer that's about to commit a massacre. And wedged inside a Jeffries tube, calibrating that ion pod for the neutrinos with everything falling apart around him, Scotty finally does it. He puts his faith in the ship to hold together, and it does. This is the moment Scotty becomes the miracle worker, who's easily the most beloved engineer in science fiction. Also, he gets stuck babysitting the new Vulcan cadet, Ashaw, throughout the whole ordeal, who irritates him to no end, but saves his ass more than once, helping him restore comms and beaming him safely in and out of that tube, despite barely being trained. Just a reminder for the future, when Scotty's going to inspire and become an icon for generations. What's coming next? Speaking of the future, let's look into ours, specifically next Thursday, September 3rd. The show is going to swerve right back into weird territory. Episode 7 is called Like Chronotons Through the Hourglass, and yeah, that's a parody of the Days of Our Lives tagline, like sands through the hourglass. If you don't know, Days of Our Lives is a soap opera and one of the longest-running TV shows ever, and chronotons are Star Trek's go-to time travel particle. Put these together, and the synopsis confirms exactly what you might guess. A temporal anomaly traps the crew inside a soap opera reality where Pike confronts a life he lost. So, considering we're about to get a timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly soap opera episode, I think it's safe to say that the genre experiments aren't done after all. Off Hour this week was just a break in between, not the new normal. As for our thoughts on how it'll happen, the key phrase, I think, is a life he lost, and that's pretty damn accurate for Pike. Remember, he's been carrying two enormous losses. The first is Batel, a woman he loved who was turned into a Gorn hybrid who then transforms into the Beholder, an eternal Stone Guardian who had to sacrifice her normal life and is basically gone forever. The other thing, which is frankly what the whole show is built on, Pike knows exactly how and when his own life ends. Remember, in Discovery, he saw his future in that time crystal, the horrific accident where he's disfigured by Delta radiation and trapped in a life support wheelchair. But he chose not to cower or hide, but to walk towards his destiny regardless. So I think this soap opera reality is almost certainly going to dangle an alternate version of his existence in front of him, and he'll have to confront this idyllic future where he doesn't get hurt, where Batel lives, where everything is happily ever after. A future where he gets to be happy. I can predict quite easily that the heartbreaking climax will be a gut punch of a scene where Pike has to let go of that fantasy and accept his real path all over again. Considering the season's obsession with time and destiny, and also considering that we're marching towards a finale literally called Tomorrow's Enterprise, I'd bet this next episode will be about Pike's choice and how he deals with his fate, of course, while being dressed up as a cheesy TV show. Because that's just the way Strange New Worlds rolls, baby. Oh, also, I'd say to keep half an eye on Mbenga, because the Instagram post that revealed the titles has him paired with this episode, which might just mean he plays a prominent role. Also, he spent this last episode getting frozen solid and talking about leaving Starfleet, so you gotta focus on him a little more after that, you know what I mean? That said, the bigger picture remains the same, even if the little pictures are all wildly different and unexpected. This is the second to last season. There's only a short 6-episode run left after this season to hand the ship and crew over to James T. Kirk, who's popping up every now and then. Every single one of these episodes, silly or serious, keeps nudging the pieces on the board back to their original series positions. Nurse Chapel is now committed to staying, Scotty has started becoming Scotty, Boyce just walked back into canon, Spock had a major character arc last week, and Kirk, well, he's out there waiting. Many roads, same destination, baby. So that was Off Hour, and I loved it. After weeks of the show showing off how many genres it can do, this was a reminder that its best episodes are about this great crew with an impossible problem, because we get to see these wonderful people who would die for each other, solving it with science and also stubbornness. And I know I'm not alone. I bet most, if not all, think this was one of the strongest episodes of the season, the one that finally felt like classic Star Trek again. I legit thought, damn, this is the show at its best, like halfway through, and my opinion didn't change for the rest of the runtime. So now, we want to hear from you. Did this episode hit you as hard as it hit me? And are you glad the show went grounded, or do you miss the gimmicks already? And how are you feeling about the soap opera episode next week? Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments section down below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like it. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.